And the funny thing is, the New York Times, a newspaper that clearly loves privatization, is trying to actually make this racial, even though Sandy Springs is home to Herman Cain, Akon, members of the Atlanta Braves and the Atlanta Falcons. John McDonough is the city manager of Sandy Springs. Hi, John.
Hello, Andrew. Thank you for having me on tonight.
Well, we here at the table are actually very much enjoying looking at the layout of the city here. You've pretty much privatized anything that can be privatized, whether it's legal services or permit services or city engineering. You have very little liability with the public sector unions. I mean, I should say you have none.
That's correct. We don't have any public sector unions here, and we have outsourced virtually everything under our general government services headings, from human resources, information technology, all of our community development and public works functions, so almost from soup to nuts. You're correct.
Now, one of the funny things is I was reading the New York Times article on the city, and the writer gave a lot of weight to the racial implications, as I was reading earlier. They interviewed an author named Evan McKenzie, who wrote the book Privatopia, and his complaint about your city and cities like yours is you seem to wall yourselves off from other cities and communities with a lower economic standard of living. And I would have to say I kind of support your ability to protect your residents from wealth redistribution.
You know, that's an interesting take on what we've done in Sandy Springs, but it really couldn't be further from the truth. We have a very diverse population, I think, as you saw in the New York Times article. And what we've been able to do here, based on the way that we provide services, is to increase the level of services to all of our citizens. Interestingly enough, the taxes that are collected, the property taxes that are collected in Sandy Springs, over 84% of those taxes still go to Fulton County and the Fulton County School District. We're just doing more with what we're able to keep here locally with that 14%.
Hi, John. It's Essie Cup. I'm wondering if you can give me a little history lesson here. Was it always thus in Shady Springs, Georgia, and suddenly the rest of the country has sort of just discovered that privatization might be a good economic policy? Or was this a response that you implemented recently to address sort of the ills that the entire country is facing, bad economy?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both. In Sandy Springs, we had a unique opportunity back in 2005 to start a new city from scratch. Not a lot of places have that opportunity, and we really wanted to do it right, take the best practices that existed out there, and based on the input that we had from a bunch of business people and community leaders, they wanted to focus on customer service, cost efficiency. Right. And that's how we were able to establish this government. But are there applicability to other places that have found themselves in financial difficulties today? Absolutely.
Well, and just quickly, apologies. Sure. Sandy Springs, apologies. I misspoke.
Sandy Springs, that's
Got
right.
it.
You guys aren't shady. We don't want to.
No Shady Springs.
John, this is Wilkow.
The light shines brightly on Sandy Springs.
That's actually where I wanted to go next. You did have the advantage of starting from scratch. You guys did incorporate in, 2005, like you said. You did get the ability to say, this is how we're going to build this city. We're going to start with privatizing everything we possibly can. Tell us how. You suggested there are ways. An existing city, maybe one not quite in the dire strait that Stockton, California is, but an existing city with public employees can begin to move in this direction. It seems like they have a much bigger hurdle in front of them.
Yeah, I think because of the legacy systems, whether they be personnel or systems themselves that are in place, it makes it a challenge. But certainly, given the situation that many communities are faced with today, they have to begin to look at other alternatives. And outsourcing is a tool. I tell people, and we get a lot of calls from around the country and internationally about what we do here in Sandy Springs, and I tell people it's a tool. We've used it very successfully in our case, and I think there are many opportunities across the country and communities to look at outsourcing as a way to leverage competition, whether it's amongst their own workforce, as was done successfully by Mayor Goldsmith in Indianapolis a number of years ago, or if they just want to put these services out for bid. But I think existing employees ought to have the opportunity under a controlled setting to compete in this competition and to see if they can do it as effectively as the private sector.
Hey, John, Amy here. I read that when you made the decision to privatize all of these services, you had 94% of voters agreeing with this. You can't get 94% of Americans to agree that chocolate ice cream is better than strawberry. So this is incredible. But I do want to ask, what is one of the biggest complaints that residents of, now I'm going to say Sandy Springs,
Sorry.
have about this new model you're pursuing?
You know, interestingly enough, we did a customer survey at the 5-year mark, which was a little over a year ago, and the marks that we received across the board related to the direction of the city and the outsourcing itself were very high. What people aren't happy with today, or where we have a challenge, is with traffic, and you know, that's a challenge that we all live with here in Metro Atlanta, and one that's at the top of our list to begin to address as we go forward. But as far as the outsourced services, to the average citizen, they don't really care whether it's a city employee or an outsourced employee. They just want good service, and that's what this model's been able to give them.
You know, I want to bring this back to the table, Buck. We were talking before the program about when you deal with government, it could always be frustrating. When you deal with the private sector, it could always be frustrating. But the difference between government, the public sector, and the private sector is when you're sick of dealing with something,
you can always just go to the next private company. Competition, and immediate competition, not competition every 2 years or 4 years or whatever the case may be for your local and municipal elections. And, you know, one thing that we haven't really gotten into here, but I think it's interesting, is that this also shows it's contrary to what the standard is across the country, which is viewing municipal governance as a job factory.
Right.
People should just have these jobs where they show up, they don't do a whole lot, not a whole lot is expected. And I just think that this shows that that's not necessarily the way that cities have to function. They should not function that way. And in fact, there are real benefits from not allowing them to function that way.
And I don't think we've impressed upon the detail quite enough of how much Sandy Springs has privatized. I'd encourage people to go to Reason TV and see a piece they did on Sandy Springs, or read the New York Times article you're talking about. But these
get
guys,
past the racial stuff, right past it.
These guys have privatized damn near everything. I mean, the city hall.
The
city hall.
They're not.
Right.
You know, we're not.
Yeah, you're right. Police and fire.
But
Police and fire, they have
as
not.
a libertarian, this is really exciting because you always get pushed. The first, and whenever you even say you're libertarian, what happens then? They say, well, don't you like roads? Don't you like police and fire?
Yeah, like
here
the ones
we
in
can
Sandy
say,
Springs.
what about being a libertarian 80% of the way? What about doing it most of the way and then actually drawing a line at, you know, police, firemen, whatever the case may be?